Let's go ahead and get started then. It's 4:30. Thanks everybody for coming. Hope you've been having a good day at CXC. I'm Andy Kunka. I'm a professor of English at the University of South Carolina Sumter, where I teach comics, and my most recent work is The Life and Comics of Howard Cruse, Taking Risks in the Service of Truth, which was nominated for an Eisner Award, and John presented that award and read my name wrong when he announced the winner. It was a little awkward. He said Exner instead of Kunka.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I hoped you would have just tossed it to me anyway.
I wanted to so badly.
So, thanks. Before I introduce our panelists on our panel on modern publishing, I want to thank our sponsors, which include the Greater Columbus Arts Council, the Ohio Arts Council, White Castle, Columbus Foundation, UBS, the Japan Foundation, and our other festival sponsors. So thanks. Let's give a round of applause for our sponsors. And yeah, this is the last panel session for today. So again, I hope everybody's had a great show. I hope our panelists have been doing well. It's been packed upstairs, it looks like. And we've got another great day of programming and expo tomorrow as well. So I'm going to go around and introduce our panelists. First is Calvin Reid, who was among other things, the winner of the much-deserved Tom Spurgeon Award last night. So congratulations on that. Calvin's now retired as a full-time staffer at Publishers Weekly, but he was the senior news editor there and editor of Publishers Weekly's Comics World, PW's online coverage of the comics and graphic novel marketplace, and the editor of The Fanatic, PW's twice-a-month e-newsletter on comics and pop culture. And I'm a big fan of The Fanatic. I enjoyed getting that. It's one of those emails that you welcome.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
Yeah. He's also the co-host of More to Come, PW's weekly podcast on comics and graphic novel publishing. Reid has covered the book industry as a reporter and editor since joining Publishers Weekly in 1987 as an associate editor. He has reported general book industry news and business trends, as well as covering digital publishing and the rise of self-publishing platforms, small press, and independent publishing, and African American publishing, in addition to his groundbreaking coverage of comics and graphic novels in the book trade. Next, we have Avi Ehrlich, the founder and publisher of Silver Sprocket, a San Francisco-based radical independent comics publisher, store, and gallery, and personally one of my favorite comic publishers going right now. So thanks for all the stuff you're putting out. And finally at the end, John Jennings, professor, graphic novelist, director of Abrams Comic Arts imprint Megascope, curator, Harvard Fellow, New York Times bestseller, 2018 Eisner winner, and all-around champion of black culture. So thanks for you all for joining us. I also want to throw in, we were just talking about the trade of Silver Surfer Ghostlight with John Road. Just came out Wednesday, right?
That's correct.
So go grab it. It's a great series, wonderful art too by Valentin DeLandro.
Thank you.
Well, I want to start out. So we've got two publishers, and Calvin here has covered the publishing industry for so long. So I want to start with you, Calvin, with a question about kind of an overview of the current kind of state of modern publishing, but starting out kind of on a positive.
Okay.
What are some of the positive trends you're seeing right now in modern comics publishing?
Well, I see a lot of positives. I mean, we see new imprints, we see new small publishers, we see independent publishers. We even see the larger publishers starting to take note of how the comics marketplace, and in particular in North America, is starting to reflect the population, or in fact, starting to reflect what a general publishing venture should look like. We've seen the end of the one genre marketplace that has kind of typified North American and American publishing, and you mean superhero comics publishing. Mm-hmm. Obviously, not to denigrate superhero comics made me into the obsessive comics person I am today. But the current moment, we're living in a transition in where you get your comics, who's publishing them, who's writing them, where the stories are coming from. Avi is, of course, a wonderful example, and so is John, at a bigger publisher. Mm-hmm. So I think what you're seeing with manga and manga adjacent content, that unfortunate word, but just comics works of all kind. What we're seeing in digital comics on Webtoon is just a transformed marketplace. And I was introduced to comics, through Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman. Later, Marvel for me. I was a DC kid, and then I was Marvel comics. I became obsessive about Jack Kirby in particular, obviously enough. Later, of course, the underground comics. But what we have now is a kind of a market correction, as we see comics that are across multiple genres, in particular Asian influence comics, really transforming the marketplace and who is buying comics. So I could, how's that? I could go on, but that would be my general, overview of what the marketplace looks right now.
That's great, because what you said there really struck me when I think about my own students when I teach comics classes, that I get so many students, when I ask them if they read comics, they say no, mm-hmm. and then I prod a little further, and they read Webtoon, they read manga, they've read, Raina is here, they've read Raina sure. Telgemeier. They are comics readers, but they don't consider themselves comics readers because they think of these things as other. I don't know if anybody, has a comment or thought about that kind of phenomenon of this new generation of
just
readers.
One more thing, the
Yeah.
book format. And I think the book format for me is key, even for the digital iteration of comics. The book format, I just think, has been transformative to the comics medium in North America.
Mm. I would say, to your point, Andy, I teach a course at, before teaching in media and cultural studies, I taught graphic design and illustration for roughly like 20 years or so. And I transitioned over to doing like media studies, because I was extremely interested in like how the work that we were doing was kind of like changing like popular attitudes around how we see each other. I've always been interested in like representation, how not seeing yourself in a particular space affects you, that kind of thing. So one of the classes I teach is called Between the Panels, and it's all about like comics and contemporary culture. And so, like yourself, one of the things I ask the students is like, well, do you read comics? And usually out of like say 30, 40 students, maybe a couple of hands will go up. There's very little like, because one thing we've lost is like comics, how to read comics, so far like just the idea of like the medium itself, because I think what you're kind of pointing to, and something that Calvin touched on, is that there's a there's this conflation or confusion of like genre and medium, mm-hmm. that I've been constantly trying to like untether, so
oh, yes.
So I don't teach a lot of superhero comics in the class, we might study like the culture itself with like the Comic-Cons and stuff like that. and fandom and what have you. But for the most part, I'm trying to introduce them to different, types of stories that can be told, in the medium. So we start with like a contract with God, and we end up with something, just wild, or something like, what's the name? Rendezvous in Phoenix, stuff like that. So it just goes and sprawls out, so they can see the possibilities, But yeah, that's where we are now. I think there's a lot of people who are like huge fans of like superheroes and things because of the films and the video games, but not necessarily like following, comics as a, as a medium. Like I really don't think there's such a thing as like mainstream comics, really. Not in the sense that we're using it. I think they're mainstream characters, but
not in the sense we've historically used it. Because
Right.
of course, in the conventional comics industry, if you say mainstream, you mean superheroes.
Exactly.
You don't mean a naturalistic love story. That's
Nope.
something fringy. Love and Rockets is sort of weird. But anyway.
Yeah. So, Avi,
Yeah, I mean, to call Spider-Man or Superman a mainstream comic is just batshit insane.
Right.
A best-selling Spider-Man comic this month sold like 30 or 40,000 copies, if that. Meanwhile, like artists on Silver Sprocket have literally a million Instagram followers.
Exactly.
And like, that's way more mainstream. Like what's going on Webtoon, what's going on with manga, our scope is in a really weird place. And I think to your earlier question about the state of the industry, I think the industry is like kind of catching up and realizing like, oh wait, there's so much more to comics than this. Like comics really are, it's such an art form that's so accessible to, can you read it? Well, can you kind of read even if you can't really read that well? There's pictures.
You can figure it out.
So it's so much more accessible, democratized, like anybody can make a comic, anyone
That's
can
right.
read a comic. Like there's so many people in this room who didn't have to ask anyone for permission to tell their story on their own terms. And then publishers like myself and Fanagraphics or Drawn and Quarterly are like, oh, I see a crowd at that table. I wonder what that's about. And then all of a sudden you're in a position where like Publishers Weekly or NPR can talk about you, and that shit happens all the time. Like my favorite thing is Monsters is so much more exciting than anything that Marvel and DC have done in a long forever. So I think that there's a massive expansion right now of an understanding of what comics is and can be. And there's money there, so the industry is chasing it.
There is sometimes this misunderstanding that because perhaps, it is. I mean, there are decline. I mean, the superhero genre is a kind of a declining genre. But I don't even think of it that way. I think of it as a market correction. I mean, so often in the North American market, you couldn't sell anything else. Direct market stores, it's a very interesting, and once again, this is not against direct market stores, but it has a business model. The non-returnable wholesale model is very discouraging for material that you don't understand already.
Well, the periodical model
The
too.
periodical
Yeah,
model.
Like when your product is intended to be obsolete a month later, like you're like, how can you like a real piece of literature, like a film or a book, that's really good, is meant to stick around, and you want to continue to champion it. Like, hey, this book rules, and it'll still be amazing a year from now,
Right.
and there'll still be new people coming into my store every day. But this mentality that the regular like superhero comic book shop has is like, oh well, I don't want to carry like an amazing one shot and champion it. I want someone to get hooked on Spider-Man and buy it every month. And it's like, okay, well, there's other shit to do to compete with people's attention now. Like,
Yes.
how about bring in the book that you know is amazing, put it in a place of honor, and like actually let everyone have a chance to interact with it. So, I mean, we're like a comic publisher for people who don't like comics or who don't think they like comics, because that's not we're not selling them on like the WWE wrestling like never-ending soap opera. We're like, no, this is a piece of good quality evergreen literature. So it's weird, and like the big bookstores are like, I don't know, it doesn't have a spine, it has pictures in it, and the comic book stores are like, oh well, that one did well. When's the next issue? And it's like, why would we told the story well? It's still good. Like, get over yourself. So
So it's a market in transition.
Yeah.
Definitely.
yes.
But you do have like larger spaces that are, like you said, like learning that too, right? So, for instance, at Abrams, they have now they're starting a new division that is just comics instead of like having it housed under like younger readers. So comic arts is now transitioning and becoming its own division, which is really awesome. And under the leadership of Rodolphe Lecat, he's bringing in a bunch of really, really awesome stuff from Europe, a lot of manga, and actually different imprints that are dealing with the meme itself, telling different stories that we haven't seen before.
And this is happening all across the trade, and at New York big trade houses.
Right.
At PRH, Incolor, they've launched a new imprint that is looking at all of this, and particularly taking, publishing manga, also taking webtoon, digital comics, and redesigning them for print. And you're seeing that already through like Lore Olympus, which is just huge. What, 4 volumes, all of them bestsellers.
Millions of readers online too.
Yes,
Like,
of course.
That's not a risky
that hasn't
bet.
gone away. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I do want to note too, like how important it is these publishing houses are realizing that there's value in having a centralized hub that handles the comics and not just making it that the different branches get to do like 1 or 2 comics as part of their lines.
There you go.
Because so many cartoonists that I work with have the worst horror stories of working, Abrams and others, where their editor just didn't really understand how making a comic is different from making a book, and they turn in their scripts, then their roughs, then their inks, then their colors, and then they get notes about like moving things around, and it's like, no, you had to give that note at like the thumb stage.
At the beginning,
Because
exactly.
right now you're asking us to remake the book from basically scratch, and
Right.
like that institutionalized knowledge only comes from specializing in, really having a thorough understanding of how the development is different. So there's been like this transition has been a long time coming, and they really fucked up some earlier versions of trying it.
Without a
Yeah.
doubt.
But I feel like now we're at a very interesting point where they're actually understanding like, oh, okay, we have to actually do this right, give it its own set of resources and breathing room.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm bless your heart. I'm so glad that you're doing this.
Well, thank you very much.
And throughout the infrastructure of the publishing house, the marketing, all of this that needs distribution, all of this needs to be adjusted to this new format, this new way of looking, new for
Yeah.
trade houses.
But it's not that different from books. Like it's a book at the end of the day.
Right.
Like you can still put it on a shelf at Barnes and Noble, but it's like there are considerations, like things to keep in mind that are different.
Yeah, the affordances of comics are very different. So how we tell stories in that particular medium are different than how you tell in film or like prose, what have you. And to piggyback off what you're saying, Avi, is like now you actually have like a educational infrastructure, right, where you now have programs that are teaching students how to tell stories properly in this medium. And now you have like all over the country like MFAs and undergraduate programs that are teaching graphic storytelling. A new one just opened in Boston, for instance, that Joe Christian Gill is running, at Boston University. So BU. So well-funded, very smart professors, who are actually teaching, a new generation of scholars and editors and creators how to actually work in this medium, which is ridiculously exciting, actually.
Yeah,
So,
all the art schools are getting comics programs now because they're like, oh wait, this is like a real thing now. Like this isn't like an like wait, I'm paying for your college for what? It's like you can actually look up to somebody and have like goals that your parents can understand. It's wild.
I'm so jealous because when I started, I was like, it was like just the comics program was like kind of housed, like you said, in like art programs,
Like
or it's
illustration.
like, or like people illustration, or you'd be like, well, the closest thing I have is like graphic design, so I guess I'll be a graphic designer, but I really want to be a comic artist.
Yes.
That's kind of like a
that's
lot
been
of
the traditional kind of workaround.
Yes, right. It's a workaround. It's like, well, maybe they'll pay for me to be a graphic designer.
And we have to remember, manga is dominating sales in the book trade. I mean, just flat out dominating. So
We didn't have they weren't hamstrung by the Comics Code Authority, and
No.
I think you wrote
Absolutely.
like a book about this, or at least some.
I wrote
articles.
a long article about it. Yes, it's called
Fascinating.
How Comics Got to Now. So yes, it's in the 150th anniversary issue of Publishers Weekly, which came out in 2022. 150 years. PW. We've been around, ain't going anywhere. But we did a section on comics publishing, and I wrote an essay about just the book trade, looking at the development of the American comics market and what that meant for artists and distributors and publishers. So it's online.
Yeah, it's a useful article. I've just when you're talking about, I just finished writing my half of the Routledge Introduction to American Comics that I'm working on with Rachel Miller, who's here in Columbus.
Very talented.
And we decided when we wanted to figure out how we're going to do a history of comics that's different from what's been done, we decided to treat it as like a kind of history of formats, which led to a history of publishing more than it was a history of like great cartoonists over time, and come to see how the different formats go through these almost like a kind of dialectical shift of which one's the most popular at a given time, and we're definitely seem to be at a period where it's kind of a combination of the book and the web comic being dominant, but also mini comics having a powerful moment too. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, like, so those Silver Surfer comics that you have on your desk, that's not the most pleasant format to read a comic in. And it's completely a byproduct of when those comics came into existence, that the page was a certain size and the printer was able to fold it up in a certain way and like economically make it. And like printing technology has evolved so far since then. And like the fact that this industry is still like clinging to this like really awkward shape and like it's just like designed to be disposable. It's like, why are they still doing it like that? Like there's really no good reason
outside of nostalgia, and also like
but who's nostalgia? Like no one who's alive today. Like a few people. Apologies.
Well, also, I mean, we were talking about Webtoon, Webtoon as a format, as a digital format, not the company Webtoon. It gets a little confusing, which isn't page based. It's essentially panel based.
That's right.
So I mean, when you see these volumes of Lore Olympus, I mean that had to be completely rethought and reconsidered to match the book page. So we're going to see this fluidity, I think, between print and webs, because I mean digital comics tend to make people want print comics.
Our books that are the best selling in print are the easiest to read for free online. So like back in the day, you would like go to the record store and like see an album that looked cool and you take it home. But in the year of our Lord 2023, like you don't really buy something unless you already know you want it. Like you've already started reading it, you know something about it, like a friend has recommended it. So like I don't understand these comic shops that everything's like in a poly bag. They're like, oh, don't read it till you buy it. It's like, okay, if you only want to sell to collectors, but if you actually want readers, like let them read it. Like the web is not competition with print; it's promotion for print.
Exactly.
And you got to think bigger and more holistically about what your business is. And it's not even just selling the books; it's selling everything around it. Like it's like a lifestyle brand for. I hate those words. We're not like Vice Media, but like we think of the bigger picture of like, okay, how can we get our artists paid so they can continue making these epic comics, but have a bigger picture of like what that looks like for their particular audience and style and all that stuff.
And we should also remember that the legacy of periodical comics and their relationship to the direct market or your comic shop. I mean, this is an economic and cultural legacy that I don't think is going to go away, but its relationship to the rest of the marketplace is changing and will change. And including that comic shops are indeed bookstores too. And I think more and more of them understands that that's their role, that they're morphing into a different role. They're specialty bookstores as well as being comic shops. And I think you'll find more and more that it's almost 50-50 in the book format and the periodical format. But we do have to understand that these formats kind of serve different audiences and different needs.
Which is why they do like trade paperbacks and the like, right?
Yes,
because
absolutely.
Different market, different audience. I remember like when I was starting to write that book, I had to like teach people how to pre-order things. You know, it's like, okay, so first you have to do first you locate a comic shop, and then you have to go there, you have to start a pull list, and you have to pre-order, you have to all the codes.
There's a lot of rules.
Yeah, it's a lot of, it's like, what?
And why would you make it that hard for your fans to support your work? Like, there's no other industry that you need like a guidebook about how to do the purchase.
Yes, it's kind of wow.
And then 3 months later.
3 months
it
later,
comes out.
exactly, yeah, it comes out. And then, and there's a trade paperback. And everyone's like, is it the same book or is it a different?
It's a
And of
lot
course,
of
not even
work.
mention like the different covers, right? So it's like,
Yeah, I bought the same book 6 times because I didn't realize there were different covers. It's like,
But people do understand the difference between comic shops who buy non-returnable at wholesale and bookstores that sell essentially on consignment.
that's right.
Publishers share the risk of their new product in a business where new product is coming constantly on the book side. So publishers and retailers, they share the risk. In the comic shop market, which is changing, there are more and more returnable
There are a lot
series,
now.
Yeah.
many more than there used to be.
That's good.
But there, in this gave rise to the collectibles market. That's how comic shop retailers made their margins. They could resell things that they didn't sell at, and of course the collector's market, which is a problem. I mean, people want to collect. That's all good, but making comics collectible created a problem. Anyway, I'll just stop there.
It's like a whole other panel.
nah,
It's just a whole other issue. It creates problems.
we've had books that speculators have lost their fucking minds about and bought out like the second issue of Magical Beatdown, and it messed us up because we've got fans who want to read the whole series, and now our existing fans can't get the second issue and they're done. They don't
It's
want
a
to read the
problem.
third issue. So we went right back to print with no changes at all. And we announced that. We're like, hey, all those books you just bought for like $30 on eBay, they're worthless because our next printing is going to look exactly like the previous one. Please never do this with one of our books again.
Yes, that kind of stuff is really crazy where you've got speculators.
Dude,
Yes.
the mail we got about that
and
was
the
so
whole
funny.
notion of collecting books you're buying books to collect them rather than read them. I mean, nothing wrong with that, but it's a problem.
If it's a
Yeah.
collectible,
It's
we'll
a
tell you
problem.
so. We'll make like numbered, signed like art prints or whatever, but
Yeah.
like you'll know.
Right.
But it's a problem.
Don't fuck with our fans.
Yeah.
Yeah, didn't something like that just happen with Uncivilized, the sickness #1, that it went on like one of those collectors apps, like kind of announced it as a collectible, and suddenly you couldn't get that issue anymore. And that's, again, that's an Uncivilized book. Calvin, what you're saying too, it just kind of makes me think of the kind of comic shops I know that seem to be going in two different directions. Some can becoming, you said, as you talked about, the ones becoming bookstores, but the others are becoming pure collectible shops then, that they're barely getting new comics in. They're specializing in back issues. They're dealing with the kind of
Variant
whale
covers.
collectors who
Yeah.
come in and will
Whale
will
collectors.
buy the giant size X-Men #1 graded
Right.
Yeah.
copy and the Funko Pops and things like that.
Yeah. Now, I mean, all retailers are, want to diversify the merchandise that they sell. I mean, it's a tough business.
Yeah.
Whether you're selling books, whether you're selling comics and books, retailing books, this is a tough business. There's no margins. You have to work like a dog. It's an event, and in the book trade especially, it's kind of an events-oriented. But you have a store as well, right?
Yeah,
So you should talk about that, yeah. So you have both sides.
That's
So,
right.
well, I do. We're a comic book store that doesn't carry periodicals at all. Like, we literally don't have an account with Diamond or Lunar, because all the books that are worth having, we can either get them directly from the publisher or any of the book trade distribution outlets. We sell books to readers, not to collectors. Like, we have couches, and we encourage people to hang out and read whatever they want. But we also have over 300 suppliers that we order from at least once every 2 months, which is work that a lot of traditional comic shop owners don't want to do. I kind of lost the thread of what the question was, but
No, there wasn't a
it was
question.
kind of free
but,
form.
but I will say though that I'm on a lot of message boards with comic shop owners, and all of them across the board are talking about how periodical sales are going down and down, and that they're having to dedicate more of their floor space to graphic novels and trades.
Right.
Which, I think is to my point of like, no, this is actually good and it's going to still be good next week. And, buying behavior, like it's changing. So.
Look, we haven't even talked about some of the kind of toxic nature, the history of legacy in comic shops. I mean, I'd like to think that it's a better world out there now. Certainly in the comic shops that I frequent in New York, it's this stuff is from the past. But they could be places that were not inviting.
As far as like how customers are treated indirectly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that you bring up a really good point. So. Once I started teaching like this comics course, I mean, it's about comics culture, right? So a lot of the students had never been in a comic on a direct market, story at all, right? And, I teach at a HSI, Hispanic Serving Institution, right? So it's mostly brown folk that I'm teaching. So I asked them, what I did this project was, okay, let's do like an observation or like a grading of like your experience in a space, and, so basically, like, how are you treated in this space? What was available? Did it have diverse content? Was it accessible on various, the wheelchairs or what have you? Was it accessible? In general, and how were you treated? And mostly they were treated well in the spaces, right? So as far as like someone trying to help them or trying to help them find something that they're looking for, that kind of thing.
So the world is changing. I mean, the world of comic shops that I grew up in is hopefully gone. The culture was in the shops, and who would go to look? Obviously, women. I mean, the comic shops that you didn't see any girls or young women in them ever. But that's like I said. This is part of a legacy that we are hopefully getting rid of and is disappearing as a younger generation of retailers take over, and once again. Trying to get new customers and this new demographic of comics readers who don't believe they're reading comics. But we're broadening the understanding of what comics are, because we know that comics is a medium. It can deal with anything. It can talk about anything. It can create stories from any corner of human experience.
Right.
And superhero stories are one of the genres within a whole range of genres.
Yeah, it's very small. It's almost like saying like novels are only for romance.
Yeah.
Or like radio is only for like talk radio.
Yeah, and you
So
wouldn't
it's
go
ridiculous.
You wouldn't go into a bookstore, and expect to see only romance
novels.
Right. Right.
You would be like, what is it?
This is a North American phenomenon.
Yeah.
I mean,
It really is.
This doesn't exist in other parts of the world.
It's funny.
Yeah.
I used to talk about it all the time before I went to France. I was like, in France, they call it the ninth art, and this is stuff I've read.
Yeah.
And then when I actually got a chance to go to France, I was like, it's true.
Yeah.
It's totally true.
Man,
they actually are treating this is interesting.
Say what you want, but they love their comics,
So
all
much.
of them, all kinds
They
of
eat
them.
comics if they could.
And of course, the world of Japanese,
forget
Asian
about it.
comics broadly. I mean, it's just astounding.
We're trying to play
incredible
we're playing
range of
catch up.
material.
Can you imagine going to like a sporting goods store and all they have is baseball stuff?
Right.
Yeah.
You would think they're insane.
Exactly.
What market are you?
Exactly.
Well, what we're cycling back to is that original comment I made about my students that I think those students who are reading comics but not seeing themselves as comic readers are thinking about comics in this very narrow, that they don't go to the comic book store every Wednesday to get their new comics, but they're consuming them in other ways. But that to be a comics reader for them means this kind of more of a habit than or a hobby than like a part of their reading consumption.
No, it's so funny too, because like these characters, like I said, the whole idea of like mainstream comics is so crazy to me. Like when the X-Men films came out, right? My wife loved the X-Men movies, right? Didn't know they were comics at all.
Yeah.
Didn't know they were comic books. She was like, "Oh, I thought it was an adaptation of the cartoon."
Yeah. Well,
It's like, what is what?
I tell this story. I tell this story a lot because
It's like-
I think it's really indicative of something that when the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern movie came out,
Yeah.
a student came up to me and goes, "Hey, did you see they made Green Lantern a white guy?"
Yeah, exactly.
And it was
Yeah.
because that Jon Stewart was
Yeah,
their
never
only
seen,
frame of
they'd never
reference.
seen Hal
Yeah.
Jordan before.
Yeah, I grew up with Hal Jordan, you know, so yeah.
I did too, but it's like, but yeah, because of the cartoons, right?
Sure.
Yeah, my mom hit me up. She said, "You ever heard of Green Lantern?" I was like, "I'm familiar, yes."
Yes.
It was very niche. It's a small thing.
Yeah.
It's not mainstream at all, actually.
I just looked at the clock and we're butting up against 40 minutes here, which is the time we're supposed to open up for questions. I'm really glad that I got to ask y'all one question.
It got us going.
You just
yeah.
ran with it because that's the
You got us going.
That's the dream of doing these panels. I'll do a panel with you guys every time, and
I'm
I'll
glad
just
to fulfill
go-
your dream,
Go get a
Avi.
drink and something. Start going. But let's open up the floor to some questions here, so that and I'll have to just let everyone know I have to repeat the question so that there's a little gap between when the question's asked and when you start answering.
She was
Craig.
first.
Oh,
There's-
sorry.
there's
Yeah,
somebody
go
in
ahead
the
in the
back,
back.
Yeah, she was first. Unless you were just stretching. Were you stretching or you had a question? Okay. She said both.
So, is it weird if, okay, I'm one of those people who didn't grow up with comics, right? Like, manga is what got me into comics. But I'm not Japanese and I don't live in that, country. Would you think it's, like, odd, I guess, to kind of format it in that way? What inspired me, right? Like, I would want to sort of pay homage to my own inspiration, but I'm not from that culture. I'm not really even talking about appropriation, just more like, I'm in America selling to an American audience, so should I guess, I don't know, kind of conform to their expectations, or should I just kind of pay that homage to what inspired me?
When you say format, what do you mean? You mean doing it right to left, or what do you mean?
Well,
Just
I-
the page layout?
Stylistic
The
conventions.
yeah.
So I think like I'm used to the smaller format that manga is sold in, thick 200-page something, not the floppies or the
Sure, yeah,
trade
like
paperbacks,
what they call in Japan,
with the more-
tankobon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We
You should do
publish-
you.
Absolutely. Like the difference with appropriation is like, are you respectful to what it is that you're referencing? But yeah, make your, and there's so many upstairs right now. Like, I mean, I think that makes way more sense than being inspired by whatever this monstrosity. Like, yeah, you're gonna be inspired by whatever. Like, if you read French literature, you'll be inspired by that. Like, you're totally fine as long as you're being respectful to it. Like,
And that train has kind of left the station. I mean, manga has transformed American comics writing and drawing, and it's
Yeah.
It's
out the box.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
what the Seven Seas? What I mean, they're doing. Look, there was a whole around 2010 or so. There was the whole controversy about English language manga. What was it? With around Tokyo Pop and that whole deal. But the fact is, everything you're talking about has infiltrated American comics for your generation and that generation of creators. And you can see it all over, even the American superhero comics.
Right.
So, I mean, yes, be respectful, but I mean, it's kind of hard to tell now,
And those are the best sellers for the American publishers too. Like
Yeah.
Dark Horse's bestseller ever is like what, Berserk, or I'm mixing up.
Oh, Berserk, yeah, is what the.
Oh no, that was
the
someone
Keanu
else's.
Reeves deal?
No,
yeah.
not that one.
Yeah.
It's a big seller.
It's
But I
kind of.
but I know Dark Horse's bestseller ever is a manga series, and it's
Yeah.
like the overwhelming. Anyways, you're fine. Don't feel bad.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
What you're saying
Yeah.
is going on right now.
Right. I mean,
Plus, there's no accident that like Scholastic puts out their books in that size.
That size,
too.
yeah.
It makes
that
sense.
format.
That's a size that makes sense to publish at.
Yes, absolutely.
It's pleasant to hold. It'll fit in your pocket nice.
Yeah.
Lone Wolf and Cub.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
that. That's a great book.
Those are like
Yeah.
this big though. Like
Yeah.
the Dark Horse published those tiny.
I mean, the book format, when I say book format, I mean whether we're talking about trade paperbacks, hardcovers, mass market paperbacks, a smaller variety. This format is to my mind, the most important thing that has happened to North American comics, because comics in this country were thought of as being those,
Right.
being the comic book.
floppies.
The comic book, American comic, is not a book
No.
in
I'm
a
trading
format.
paperback too, so,
It's
you
a
know.
periodical.
That's cool.
And the
Yeah.
comics industry was essentially part of the magazine
it's like,
industry.
yeah.
But
That's what they always
that
do,
continues.
you know, so.
But the book format, of having a spine and being sold in bookstores, that has been revolutionary. It's changed storytelling, it's changed the economics, and of course in the book trade, the terms, the contracts you sign and how you're paid, all of that has been transformed by this format.
Now, I do want to push back, though, a little bit. We also publish what we call mini comics, or one-shots that don't have a spine, that are still staple-bound, like
Sure.
generally books that are under 48 pages. And we sell the hell out of those, too. And it's true that like Barnes & Noble or whatever doesn't really know what to do with them, but plenty of bookstores do.
Sure.
And what else that I think is super exciting is as comics are becoming more embraced with culture in general, a lot of stores that don't even think of themselves as being bookstores now have book sections, and you've got like coffee shops. Like it's not even like back like head shops where the original like alternative comics with an X were all sold.
Yeah.
And we're kind of seeing like a new version of that it's not like small potatoes. Like we've got books that'll sell like 5,000 or 10,000 copies, which is a lot for a comic book today, where the main distribution is not comic book stores.
Right.
And these are books that don't have spines. So I think like we're in a really exciting time right now where the market is just blowing right open, and it's more like, oh, this is relevant to my community, my interest. It's more of like a values thing than a like literature thing or anyway. So just it's not just the spine makes it accessible to the book trade, which means
True,
like normal like any
Yeah.
store that carries books, but that's not the only game in town for selling comics. And it's not just the book trade and the direct market. There's so much more right now.
No, he's absolutely
Keep
right.
it up.
Thank you for that.
You had your hand up.
Yes.
So I think that I love the fact that y'all all know what y'all do. It keeps up with the arms when my arm moves.
It's a lot of power.
When I move,
I love it. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Hey.
Yeah, great book. That's a great book.
All right, cool. I was just confused. I'm like, I'm not even pressing no buttons.
Yeah. Technology, man, is like magic.
But actively, I feel like when talking about publishing, especially from the POV of an author and a writer, artist, whatever, and especially talking to students about what is capable, what is possible, what is happening in comics. I feel like comics, and this is actually a pattern I've seen in other media, whether it be film, where there's an obscurity about how many streams a Netflix movie gets. There's an ambiguity to what the economic side of the industry looks
Yeah,
like.
there's no reporting at all right now.
And that's the thing about it, is like the questions, the way a lot of people talk about comics, they say, oh, there's just no money for that, there's no space for that, there's no audience for that, and it's like, it's not me, it's the economy. I was wondering if you could shed some light on what this kind of discussion looks like, because from the ground level, it's like, oh, we none of us have any idea how anything works.
So the old systems are fucked, they're exploitive, they're designed that way. But right now we've got a renaissance, not just in comics, like indie video games are huge, where like any person or group of friends can make a game,
Right.
put it on Steam, and it can blow up online, and then you have 1 million people playing like Octodad or Bugsnax. And the people who made those video games are the same people also making indie comics. Like the skill set to make DIY animation or games or comics are the same, and these people have their audiences through social media. Like it's not like a get rich quick like golden ticket. It's like they've been making their art and developing an audience for a while, and the art that they create can exist in these different formats and find its distribution channels that are appropriate for the content and the audience. But if you're looking to like a corporate owned major publishing house, they have a very specific business model that they're going to try to shoo you into. And that business model, I feel like, I just think people should be a lot more open-minded about what business model actually makes sense for their art, and if going with a major publisher really is in their best interest, or what they're trying to get from that publisher, and what rights they can maintain to exercise outside of that deal to have like a big picture that actually works for them.
And Avi is absolutely right. And my perspective is from the mainstream book publishing industry, which has been useful in this transformation. But what he's talking about is a market that the system that I'm trained in doesn't quite know what to do with.
Yeah.
So what he's saying is right. The audience and the demand for all kinds of literature doesn't always work within the business model
True.
that the book publishing industry functions on.
Yeah, because right now, I want to say, like, isn't like BookScan still the main?
BookScan, yeah, for the book
point of
trade, and
purchase.
it's supposedly gives you what I use different estimates, 80% of
Yeah.
the sales.
And of course, like a lot of the direct market, like you're saying, are not reporting, or like it's skewed, or
But
it's,
BookScan doesn't measure library sales, for instance.
There's
okay,
one point of
interesting.
sale system called like Comics Hub that reports to BookScan, and they have like
Yes, they started.
and they're not representative of the comic book market at all. It's a very specific
It's a
type
very
of store
small
that
number,
even wants
yeah.
to use that point of sale.
And it's something.
It's only
that's-
about 100 stores.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Something like that, if that many.
If
It needs to get
that.
better.
Yeah.
Because if you're looking at like the mainstream publishing industry, then those sales, like those they matter as far as like what you're getting offered for like an advance, as far as like if a book gets picked up or not, that kind of thing. Seriously, those types of calculations are being used for like P&Ls to actually determine if that book is going to even get published at all. So it's like it's super important to make sure that we try to figure out ways to deal with like reporting and what's selling, what's not, because they're going to do like comparative books and what did that particular book sell, and what did you sell before? It's
What else that's
kinda
wild
tricky.
though is everything the comic book industry has been going through for the past like 15 years has exactly mirrored what the record industry was going through about 10 or 15 years earlier, and we're still behind that curve right at this very moment. And it's fascinating to just look at them side by side. Like it'll make your head spin how hard it is for these executives to learn anything.
I'm glad this is recorded. I had to rewatch that.
We're living in a really exciting time. I mean, you're going to hear, depressing stuff, but it's because the world is changing.
Dinosaurs are dying.
And
Rise of the mammals.
there's a new demographic, there's a younger generation, there's a broader range of consumers, and they want their comics to get them. They want their comics to be different, and how they get them is differently.
right.
Okay, we have time for one more short question, if there's any.
We covered all of it.
Yeah, so
Nice. So
get out there, I guess, and get to work publishing after this, because this was a great talk, and I really appreciate you guys wrapping up the day with this fun and lively and informative conversation. So thanks to our panel.
There you go. Read more comics. Yeah.
And go see, so John, you're at the Rosarium